Picture the version of success you were raised to want: a bigger house, a faster car, a bank balance that nobody sees. That's the whole modern formula for power. Accumulate, then quietly let the world assume the rest. But the real story of how humans first built status is far stranger than that. What if the fastest way to become a legend was giving away everything you owned? In the mountain villages of what is now Nagaland, in northeast India, that's exactly what happened. You didn't earn legendary status by keeping your wealth, you earned it by destroying it in public, one feast at a time. This is the hill country. Terraced fields cut into the steep slope, villages perched along the ridge line, every household visible to every other. There was no anonymity here. Whatever you owned or whatever you didn't, the whole village already knew. You grow up watching it happen. A family works the same field for years. Their herd grows slowly, animal by animal. Their rice stores finally start to fill. And then, instead of building higher walls around what they already own, they do something that looks like financial suicide. They throw a feast. Not a small one, a village wide feast with rice beer flowing for days and meat carried into every household, rich or poor, friend or stranger. Why would anyone work that hard just to give it all away? Because in these hills, wealth that stayed locked inside your house did nothing for you. A full granary fed only your family. A herd that never left its pen earned no one's respect. It just sat there, untouched and pointless. Status wasn't made from what you held on to, it was made from what you let go of, in front of everyone who would remember it. This is also why the system doubled as the village's safety net. A family that gave generously in good years could expect quiet, reciprocal support in lean ones. Labor in the fields, food during illness, a debt of goodwill nobody had to write down because the whole village remembered. The feast didn't just decide who looked powerful, they decided who survived the next bad harvest a little easier than everyone else. This wasn't a one-time party, it was a structure, almost a ladder with rungs you could only climb by spending. Anthropologists later named it the Feast of Merit, and it ran in stages, each one pricier than the last. The first rung was modest, relatively speaking. Among the Aunagas, it opened with a stage called Nashi Achi, the sacrifice of a bull and a few pigs, shared with your own clan, a fraction of what was still to come. But it announced something. It said, there is more where this came from, and you're prepared to prove it. Other tribes built the same ladder under different names. The Sema Naga climbed through 4 stages, Shikusho, then Apisa, then Akieghe, before reaching Inamikusa, a final feast so enormous it pulled in guests from neighboring villages entirely. Among the Chakhesang Naga, the village itself would identify the household with the fullest fields and the largest herd, and quietly expect them to host. This was never a fully private decision. The whole community was watching. The whole community had opinions about who owed them a feast. Word spread quickly once the family got close. Neighbors counted the herd. Elders watched the granary. By the time a feast was finally announced, most of the village had already guessed it was coming and had spent weeks preparing their own appetite for it. None of it happened quickly either. A complete run through every stage could take years, sometimes an entire adult lifetime. Each new feast required a fresh herd, a fresh harvest set aside before it could even be attempted. A drought could stall the climb, a sick animal could stall it further. So when a family finally finished the entire ladder, it meant something specific. Not that they were born wealthy, that they had spent years deliberately turning wealth into something the whole village would remember. And waiting at the very top of nearly every version of that ladder was a particular animal, the Mithun. You've probably never heard of it. Picture a half-wild forest cow with broad shoulders and heavy horns, left to roam the hillsides instead of being penned like an ordinary cattle. Difficult to raise, expensive to own, which is exactly why killing one in public in front of the entire village was the loudest possible statement a person could make. Among the Ao, that final stage was called Sachi. Complete it and you didn't just earn respect, you earned permanent proof of it. So what actually happened on the night it finally arrived? Drums sounded dusk. The Mithun stand tethered by a thick cane rope to a post planted in the middle of the village, calm, unaware of what it represents. Your clan and your wife's clan circle it slowly, chanting. Women in deep red cloth shake handheld blades, brass bells jangling against shell necklaces. Men dance the outer ring in full war dress, hornbill feathers rising from their headbands, spears catching the firelight. The whole village smells of wood smoke and rice beer, and at the center of it all stands the animal you spent years raising, about to become proof of everything you've built. That proof outlived the night itself, a special shawl woven in a pattern reserved only for the feast givers. So anyone who saw you walking through the village instantly knew what you had done. The skull, the horns of your sacrificed animals mounted above your own doorway, outlasting you by decades. Songs composed specifically in your honor, sung at festivals long after you were gone. Among the Chakhesang Naga, the most accomplished feast givers earned the title Jyotimi, plus the right to a particular shawl called the Elitsara, a piece of cloth that functioned less like clothing and more like a resume worn on your body. Some villages went further, hauling massive stones up from the riverbeds to be raised as monolith in the heart of the village. They are permanent markers of a feast given decades earlier, still standing for grandchildren who never met the man who gave it. It wasn't only you who got marked. Your wife earned the right to specific ornaments no other woman in the village could wear. Your daughters earned the right to a particular hornbill feather reserved only for women of a Mithun sacrificer's household. Status here didn't decorate one man's name. It rewrote what your entire family was allowed to wear for the rest of their lives. Much of what is known about this system comes from a British civil servant named J.P. Mills, who lived among the Naga tribes through the 1920s and 30s. As a colonial administrator with unexpected passion for ethnography, his actual job was administration, not anthropology. But Mills documented the practice in such detail across multiple Naga communities that historians credit him with coining the very term Feast of Merit in 1926. What he recorded wasn't a culture obsessed with hoarding. It was a culture that had built an entire social ladder out of giving feast. Here's the part that should stop you. This wasn't optional generosity. A wealthy family who refused to feast wasn't admired for their restraint. They were quietly judged. Hoarding Mithun and rice while your neighbors went hungry wasn't smart planning. It was a kind of social failure. Wealth that meant nothing because it touched no one. The entire incentive ran backwards from the one you grew up inside. You didn't get powerful by keeping, you got powerful by proving again and again that you could afford to stop. But was this actually unique to Nagaland? On the opposite side of the planet, among indigenous nations of the Pacific Northwest coast, the same exact logic appeared. No contact, no shared history, no possible exchange of ideas. Chiefs would host enormous ceremonial feasts called potlatches, distributing and sometimes deliberately destroying blankets, canoes, and carved copper shields to assert their rank. Anthropologist Franz Boas spent years documenting these ceremonies among the Kwakwakawakas in the late 1800s and early 1900s. What he found mirrored the Naga system almost exactly. Status wasn't claimed there either, it was spent into existence. A French sociologist named Marcel Mauss noticed the same pattern echoing across dozens of unrelated cultures. In 1925, he published a study still read by anthropologists today, simply titled The Gift. His argument was unsettling once you sit with it. No gift is ever truly free. Every act of generosity creates an obligation, a debt, a thread of power running from the giver to everyone who receives it. The Naga feast giver wasn't being selfless. He was doing something far more strategic. He was converting a herd of livestock into something money can rarely buy: permanent and undeniable rank. So, which version of status actually works? The one you keep or the one you give away? Maybe the honest answer is both, depending on who's watching. Fragments of the old logic are still running today. Even if nobody calls it a feast of merit anymore, the donor who funds an entire wing of a hospital and puts the family name on the wall, the friend who insists on paying for dinner every single time until it becomes a part of how people describe them, the quiet competition in certain circles over who throws the bigger wedding, the more generous gift, the more memorable party. The person who buys a round for the entire bar just because they can and watches the room remember their name for it. You call it something else now: philanthropy, generosity, hosting. But underneath, the same ancient mechanism is still running. Spend visibly enough and people remember you for it long after the money is gone. And in a stranger way, the safety net survives too, even when it's harder to see. The mutual aid fund, the crowd-funded medical bill that gets shared further because the family was generous once. The colleague who covers your shift because you covered theirs without being asked. None of it looks like a Mithun sacrifice. All of it runs on the same underlying current: status and security, built from what moves between people, not from what sits in one place. In some Naga communities, modified versions of these feasts are still given today. The rituals have changed, the meaning underneath them hasn't. What actually changed is the direction of the secret. Today, status usually hides in what you accumulate quietly and reveal only when it suits you. In those hill villages, status hid nowhere at all. It stood at the very center of the village, in the shape of a stone, a shawl, a set of horns mounted above a doorway, daring anyone who passed by to ask how it got there. So, what would your own feast of merit even look like? Go back to the version of success you were raised to want: the bigger house, the faster car, the bank balance nobody sees. Maybe that was never the only way to win. Somewhere in those hills, a farmer once stood in front of his entire village and gave away the herd it took him years to build, and walked away more powerful than he had ever been with it. Maybe he understood something about power that you're only now beginning to question. If you enjoyed this video, then please drop a like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you on the next one.